In this video, we are going to start the processes of doing detailed disassemblies on the major groups of this gun. So if you recall, in the last video, there are three groups. There's the barrel and magazine, the receiver and bolt, and then the trigger group and buttstock. Today we are going to be doing the barrel and magazine tube group. And before we get into that, there are a couple things that I want to mention. I would recommend watching this entire video or skimming through this entire video before starting the disassembly, because there are going to be some custom or unique tools that you're going to need, and it's just easier to already have them on hand before beginning this process. The next thing is, when disassembling a firearm and working with spring tension, which we will be, I recommend eye protection, because you don't want an errant spring or a plunger or pin to come out and get you in the eye. So I just wear a real basic pair of safety glasses. You can do what you want, but that's what I recommend. And finally, if you notice in this video that you are missing or have a damaged part that needs replacing, I will provide links in the description on where those parts can be obtained. And or you can kind of do what I did in some certain instances on this gun, which is to make your own, and we will talk about that a little bit when we get to those parts. So let's get started. First thing you're going to want to do with any gun is make sure it is unloaded. So we're going to press our bolt catch to the catch position. Charge that. There's that dummy round I had in there. So nothing in the chamber, nothing in the magazine. Go ahead and leave your bolt open. And we will use our strap wrench, pipe wrench, whatever you want to call it, to grab that magazine tube. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. Okay, so now we can set these two groups aside. We'll get to those in future videos. Okay, next up, there's kind of two orders that you can go in. You can either get the guts out of your magazine tube first, or you can get the magazine tube and barrel separate. Order doesn't matter, but I'm going to start with getting the guts out of the magazine tube. And you will need some sort of spanner wrench with two prongs on it, because those two prongs will go in these two holes in the magazine cap. I got this at Lowe's. I'm sure Lowe's, Home Depot, or any local hardware store will have one. This is just an adjustable spanner wrench. And I did have to modify these prongs a little bit so they would fit in those holes. And I got an adjustable one just so I could get it to the exact distance in between those holes that I needed. So you'll go ahead and loosen that up. And depending on how dirty your gun is, these may be harder to unscrew. So your magazine cap here is under spring tension by your magazine tube spring. So you're going to want to place a finger or your hand in front of that, so once it releases out of those threads, it doesn't just go flying. And when you get to the end of the threads, it'll just pop off into your hand or your finger, and let your spring out nice and slow. So there's your magazine cap, your magazine tube spring, and If your magazine tube is clean, your follower here should just pop out. You might have to use a rod or something to push it out, but it's pretty slick in there, so it just slides right out. So there's your magazine cap, your magazine spring, and your magazine follower. We will set these aside and get to work on this main body here. Okay, now with this is where you're going to need some unique or special tools. So on your threads that are on the base of your magazine tube here that screw into your receiver, there is a barrel buffer nut, and it's the piece right there that you can see that has these two slots on either side, one down there and one on that side. So that is your barrel buffer nut. Just beneath that, holding that in place, is a barrel buffer nut stop. And how to get to those is where you're going to need your special tools here. So I have two versions, one made out of PVC, one made out of metal. PVC will work just fine for a few applications, but I got tired of corners and edges rounding over due to unscrewing and screwing it back in a lot, which is why I eventually moved to a metal one. But with those tools, what you need out of those tools is you need that tool to fit over the magazine tube, but under the forend. So basically the size and width of this barrel buffer nut needs to be the dimensions of the end of your tool. So this 3/4 inch PVC has a 3/4 inch coupling, and as you can see, that coupling fits over the magazine tube but under the wood forend. And then you'll have to have some sort of prong to get into those slots to unscrew it. But you first need to get your barrel buffer nut stop out of the way. So let's rearrange the camera and I will discuss and show how to do that. Okay, so what you're going to need to do is you need a place to put, this is what has worked the easiest for me. You're going to need to place your group here. I use a block of wood just to protect my bench surface. You're going to place it down on the block of wood. Place the front end of your magazine tube down there. You're going to need your pronged tool and just a small screwdriver or a small pick of some sort. Because what you're going to need to do is you're going to push your prongs down on the barrel buffer nut that is not engaging the threads on the magazine tube. The barrel buffer nut stop is preventing it from doing so. So you're going to press down to where you can then get some clearance on your barrel buffer nut stop to kind of wedge it up onto the threads. And it's a split washer type design. So if you can find one of the legs and get it started up onto the threads, and then just kind of work your way around. And I will demonstrate this. It's hard to show it with the wood forend on. Once we get to the point where we get the wood forend off, I will show you how this works. So you get one leg up and then you just kind of go all the way around. that is your barrel buffer nut stop. As you can see, it's kind of just a split ring washer. So set that aside, don't want to lose that. And now what you're going to do is I just place the block up against something solid, and you're going to again put the front end of your magazine tube up against it, and now you're going to take your pronged tool, because now that barrel buffer nut can engage the threads on the magazine tube. You can just unscrew with those prongs. And to demonstrate first with the PVC, the corners are kind of rounded over, so might not work. But the good thing about PVC is you can just easily reshape it very quickly. So the pro of the PVC, you can reshape it very quickly. It's cheap, very inexpensive to produce, I should say. Parts are readily available in any plumbing section of a hardware store, and it works. Cons is corners round over, they can potentially break, and you just have to keep redoing it. So I'll show you about halfway. That barrel buffer nut is now coming up those threads, and I will proceed with the metal one. The pros of the metal is it's more durable. It lasts longer, you don't have to reshape it as much. The cons are you need to find a metal pipe that fits the dimensions, being wider than the magazine tube but narrower than the wood forend, and it's a little harder to shape than the PVC. But this was just some scrap pipe I had laying around, and lucky for me it happened to be the right size. So when you get to the end of those threads, your barrel spring is the official name. I think it should be more aptly named the recoil spring, but your barrel spring is pressing on this barrel buffer nut, the two buffers, and the barrel buffer washer, I believe it's called. I'll double check on that. I want to get the official name so you know what to look for if you have new parts. So when you get to the end of those threads, you're going to want to maintain pressure, and maybe even put your hand in the way so you can catch it when it comes out. It's nothing crazy, like it doesn't come flying off of there, but just proceed with caution. And when you get to the end, pop off, and your parts will come out along with your spring, and that's the remainder of the tension. So I will rearrange the camera so we can get a view of this and get a look at a better closer up view of what's going on here. Okay, so here's what this assembly looks like with the wood forend off. Normally the wood forend would be on and covering the majority of that, but now that it's off and back on the gun, we can show exactly what I was doing. So you've got your spring tension that is pressing up on all these barrel buffer pieces, and your barrel buffer nut is prohibited from activating these threads by the barrel buffer nut stop, or that little split ring piece that is underneath there. So when you press down with your tool, you can see there your barrel buffer nut stop. And you just, when you're pushing down, you kind of arrange it so you can get one of those legs up onto the threads, and maybe the other one as well. Just pry it up there a little bit, and then work around with your small screwdriver or a small tool, whatever you are using. Just kind of work it around until it's released. And then you just shimmy it up and off of there. You would then, after we rotated down on my bench in this manner, you would then take your tool, and because this spring is pressing up, it will automatically find those threads, and you would proceed to unscrew it until it was pressed off the end of the magazine tube. So that is what was happening under the forend that you couldn't see originally. So again, I will rearrange the camera and we will continue with the disassembly process. So here's the order in which those parts came out. You've got your barrel buffer nut that has the slots in it. Has the slots in it for your tool. You have two buffers, and these are not original, but we will talk about these in a second. And then you have your barrel buffer washer that goes up against the spring. So I just want to show this this barrel buffer nut and how the kind of the legs on my tool fit into those like so, and then you unscrew or screw it back on. And the same goes with the PVC. It's just the only problem with PVC is those corners tend to round over after time, and it makes it so they just slip out. So on these buffers, these are not original. The original ones look like this. And I'll do a close-up here. The original ones look like this. They are fiber, and I don't know what that means. They appear to be some sort of like hard cardboard or cork material. I assume they were soft upon manufacturing, but over almost 100 years of solvents and water, humidity, lack of humidity, just environmental conditions, they are now really hard and probably don't do much of anything to dampen recoil. They originally came with two. Upon disassembling this gun for the first time, they were both cracked like this one, and I just kind of broke this one more to see if I could figure out what it was made of. It appears to be a very woody material. When you saw through it, there's like sawdust, all that kind of stuff. So what I did is I took these are a modern material, and they were originally these. And what these are leg leveling pads for a leg that goes on a washing machine or a dryer. Maytag, Whirlpool, probably any make. There's two different versions. These I picked up at a local appliance distribution center, like a Maytag and Whirlpool distribution center. Just went in and asked if they had any leg leveling pads. These are kind of the newer version. I ordered these offline, and I will put a link in the description. But here is the packaging that they come in. And I assume that's the part number there. And what I did was just take a razor knife, basically get flush with this lip here, and just cut the inside out. And when you do that, you can trim a little more if need be, but you basically just need to trim them so they will fit over the magazine tube. And in compared to the original, they are roughly the same width and just barely smaller in the inner diameter appears to be exact. The outer diameter, the old fiber ones, are a tad bigger. But these have worked perfectly, just fine, and they are readily available in local stores and online. Whereas these, pretty much every website that I have visited to look for parts, these are sold out. And even if you do buy these, they are going to be just as hard and old as the originals, because they are original parts and they're not going to do much to help recoil for you. So let me get reorganized here and we will continue on this process. Okay, so after getting your barrel buffer nut, your barrel buffers, and your barrel buffer washer off, just set those aside. Your barrel spring, or as I would call it, a recoil spring, main recoil spring, just slides off of the magazine tube and out. Then your magazine tube and forend slide off of this barrel ring, I guess you would call it. And then your magazine tube slides out of your wood forend. So there's really only two more things that you could take apart in this group. And the first is, which I'm not going to take apart because it is riveted in there, is your ejector. So this oval piece is your ejector, and in the middle there's a circle. I don't know if you'll be able to see it on camera with the light. In the middle, that circle is the ejector rivet. And with the eye, you can see there's a circle on this other side here that would align with that circle in the ejector. So that is riveted in place. So I will not be removing that because you would probably have to drill that out, get a new rivet one in place if you needed to. So I won't be disassembling that. The next piece that you can disassemble is your magazine friction plunger, and there's a few pieces in there. And what that piece does, that is the sound that you can hear when you are unscrewing the magazine tube from the receiver. Your grooves here on the bottom of the base of that knurled portion on your magazine tube runs into that magazine friction plunger, which makes that noise. So let me grab the appropriate tool and we will take that out of there. Okay, I just needed a screwdriver that was better suited for that slot. So what you're going to do, you're going to press down. So your plunger is under spring tension. So you're going to press down until you get into the slots of what is called your magazine friction plunger escutcheon. And I'm going slow because I don't want to tear up any of the wood. Put a big gouge in it. But you'll get to a certain point where it gets a lot easier because you've lost spring tension, and that will come out with your plunger most likely still inside. And it's not wanting to come out. Just needed a little pin, press that out. Center it in the camera a little better. And then your spring still should be in that hole. Just try and fish it out of there. Maybe not. There we go. So there is your magazine friction plunger, magazine friction plunger spring, and your magazine friction plunger escutcheon. So now we have completely, aside from the ejector, disassembled. Well, I guess there is one other thing. If you're looking at parts, this barrel extension is technically a separate part that is threaded onto the barrel. If you look inside your extractor notch, you can see threads. So technically you would be able to unthread that from the barrel. But again, I have no need to do that and give myself maybe further problems, so I'm not going to. But other than that, the barrel and magazine tube section has been disassembled. I do want to speak on one more thing, and that's the wood forend here. If you recall in my slow motion shooting video, I had this piece of PVC on the magazine tube while I was shooting without the wood forend. I just wanted to clarify after watching that video that this PVC does not go on at the same time as the wood forend. It's either or, and it's just to take up the space that is provided by this piece of wood forend. Those are the same length, therefore it is one or the other, not both. Just wanted to clarify that after watching that video. So now that we are, oh no, I did want to speak about one more thing. This gray ring here is Acroglass. It's made by Brownells. I don't know if over time and shooting this wood forend had become compressed a little bit, or if I had lost wood when I originally purchased this gun, but it was giving me some timing issues with the some stuff in the trigger group that we will discuss later on. But if you were curious on what this is, that is Acroglass. And I also coated the inside of this wood forend in Acroglass. It's because on a lot of these older guns, namely this gun, the Browning Auto 5, Remington Model 11, you get cracks in the forend that it's just a byproduct of having thin wood down here and it not being that strong. So I coated the inside in Acroglass to prevent that further. I did have one crack that I repaired and got it all fixed up and put that Acroglass in there. So I believe now that I have said all that and we are disassembled, we will reassemble all of this back together. We will start with our magazine friction components. So in that hole, you're gonna put your magazine friction plunger spring, your magazine friction plunger escutcheon. Guess I can zoom in here a little bit. Magazine friction plunger escutcheon and your magazine friction plunger. It's got kind of a round tapered end and then just a straight flat end. The round tapered end goes in the escutcheon and you will screw it down into that hole. And metal into wood, you want to make sure you find your same threads. You don't want to strip the threads in that wood because then you have a hole that won't hold anything. So just go in there nice and slow. You don't want to tear up your wood. and you will go until the escutcheon is flush with the wood. And you do that so that the ridges on the base of your magazine tube don't run up against that brass piece and wear that down. So there is that. You will put your forend over that barrel ring. Your magazine tube will go down inside, and your magazine tube, once it goes in the forend, it also goes in that magazine, or in that barrel ring. Goes in there and comes out. And now I will readjust the camera to put our barrel buffer pieces back in place. I guess before I readjust the camera, I want to take a minute to discuss the other videos on YouTube that go into the disassembly and reassembly of this barrel and magazine tube group. He uses a system like this, and this is just another 3/4 inch PVC coupling that has some of those similar notches cut in it so it can grab onto those slots in your barrel buffer nut. And I have tried this system. I watched his videos. I've tried this system, and I am not a particular fan. But if you do want to attempt this method, you can watch his videos, and I will do a brief explanation here. So you basically have a threaded rod. This is a threaded 3/8 inch rod. You'll insert it through your magazine tube with a washer at one end to prevent it from going in. You will then have your spring that goes up around your magazine tube, like so. Your parts in the order that they go on, which would be your barrel buffer washer, your barrel buffers, and on your barrel buffer washer, there's like a slot cut all the way around the inside. So the outside is just smooth and flat. The inside has a groove all the way around it. That groove goes up against your magazine, and that catches and prevents from sliding off. So then your buffers would go on in any orientation. I don't think it matters, just personal preference. And there is only 2 of them. That is how the gun was originally. Then your barrel buffer nut. It would then be something to grab onto those slots. And with magazine tension, might be, or spring tension, might be kind of hard to do. But you would press that on, put a washer, and then some way to tighten it down. I chose a wing nut. So then what you would do is you would continue to tighten this down, making sure the other end isn't turning. And as you tighten this nut, it would get closer and closer and closer to your magazine tube, the threads on your magazine tube. Then you would be able to grab this piece here and thread it onto your magazine tube. I played around with this for a little while, and I just find my method easier, which is just the reverse of how we got it off. So You can play around with this method if you want. I understand that not everyone has the hand and arm strength sufficient to get it back on the way that I do. So this method might work for them. You're using mechanical advantages to get it back on instead of just strength. So I will take this apart, and now I will readjust the camera and show you how I get it back on. So my method is just the reverse order of how we got it off of there. So you've got your spring in there, your forend on, your magazine tube in there. And then you have to hold these in the order that you want them to go on, being your barrel buffer washer, your buffers, and your barrel buffer nut. So you'll line those up how you want them to go on. Line up your prongs on your notches. Basically what you're going to do now is you're going to press all of this on until the threads, and you might have to wiggle around to get those rubber buffers to go over the magazine tube. They'll want to bind up just a little bit. So you wiggle around until you get even and flush with the threads, and then you'll start tightening your tool. And these are normal threads, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Make sure I'm all lined up here. Safety glasses, they work. Now, no one's perfect. Things happen. So, try this again. Press on there, wiggle around, get your buffers on there. I've met those threads. I'm gonna slowly thread it on. And once they catch those threads, you're good to go. Now you'll readjust, get comfortable, and thread them on at your own pace. So, like I said, not everyone who has this gun may have the hand and arm strength to do that. If that other method works for you, great. If it doesn't and you're also not able to do this method, I would maybe just recommend taking it to a gun shop, a gunsmith, or having someone that you know has the hand and arm strength to do that. Or do it in this method. So when you get to the end of those threads, you'll press every once in a while to see if you're off of them. But now that you've passed them and you're off of those threads, you can push and get a little gap in there. And that is when you will rearrange, slide your barrel buffer nut stop on over those threads. Get it down until you hit flush. I'm going to use the PVC one. It offers a little more clearance inside there. And you're going to press down on your barrel buffer nut and then shimmy down until you pass the base of the threads. It should not be on the threads, it should be underneath them. Shimmy down all the way around. And it appears to be passed all the way around. And you're good. That is now back together. And so that barrel buffer nut stop now prevents your barrel buffer nut from engaging those threads while you're shooting, disassembling, cleaning, all of that. So I will again rearrange the camera and we will finish this process up. Okay, all we have left to do is on this group is put our magazine tube components back in. So you will put your magazine follower. There's a solid end and a hollow end. The solid end will go in to the front first. Kick it down there to the end. Insert your magazine spring. And instead of fighting against this, spring and having it go all weird on you, I've found it's easiest to put a long object down through it until you get to the tube, and then just feed it down in there until you get to the end. Put your cap up against it and screw it on against that spring pressure, which sometimes it can be hard to find those threads. There we go. And one other thing your gun may or may not have, I can't remember if this one originally came with it, it will be what's known as a shotgun plug. So inside the magazine tube, there will be, a 3-inch or so plug, either made of wood or plastic. And that is just to adhere to federal regulations when hunting migratory game birds. You federally cannot hunt game birds without that installed on your gun. That's migratory game birds. But check your local regulations for that. Just for shooting and target practice, it is not needed. So, and I believe the original one on here was just a rotten piece of wood that I threw out. You can buy a modern plastic one at any gun shop or sporting goods store. So once you're down flush, just give it a little twist with your spanner wrench, just snug, you don't need to overdo it. And now that is the complete disassembly and reassembly of the barrel and magazine tube group. All that we would have left to do is put this group back on our receiver. I guess I can show you this right now while we're here. So the barrel, when you get to the base here where it goes into the receiver, the barrel has a little lip on it that should line up flush or just barely inside of that receiver edge. This gray acre glass that I told you about, so let me screw it until it's snug. So this gray acre glass, if that was not there, I would have about another 1/8 of an inch to screw the magazine tube into my receiver, which would then put my barrel and all of this and this assembly back here an 1/8 inch farther back. And that is what caused the issues up inside here in this trigger group with how far it was holding the bolt back. Because we're gonna put our dummy round in, close our bolt. So if everything's an 1/8 inch back, that would also make the bolt an 1/8 of an inch back, which there's like an operating rod on the back of the bolt that was messing some timing issues up back here. But like I said, we will talk about that more when we do a thorough disassembly back here. So I've got that bolt closed. I'm gonna test my safety. Safety works. Safety off. Fires. With that dummy round in there, I will just leave the hammer in the fired position. And that is your thorough disassembly of the barrel and magazine tube group. Thank you for watching. We will get into the other groups in the next couple videos, so be sure to check those out.